Let's get sweaty.
Hey guys, welcome to a Shenmue Dojo Show bonus edition. As ever, I'm Matt. Welcome to the show, and James is with me. How you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks, mate. Are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. 1 year on from Shenmue the animation. I'm glad to be sat here talking about it with you for two reasons. The first reason is we've both rewatched it for the first time since we did the whole stream on air thing. And also, this is going to serve as our actual review of the anime because we never actually did one.
That's true. We were going to do a round table, weren't we? But life got in the way, and I think we were a little bit burnt out.
Yeah, I think we were.
Solid weeks of work, so.
It was, when you think back to it now, 13 weeks, streaming every week, show every week, artwork, it was bonkers. I think we got to the end of it, and as much as we enjoyed the anime at the time, I think we were crawling, weren't we?
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad it stopped at 13. Although I'm a little bit sad to say that now, but
yeah. So just sort of brief overview of the topics we're going to cover. We're going to talk about our likes, our dislikes, some of the story changes, some of the characters. We might go into some of the merchandise, etc. at the end as well, and give a real overview of what's out there and what our hopes might be for Season 2, which we know at the moment currently has been cancelled and isn't happening. But hey, funnier things have happened. Shenmue 3 got released, so why can't anime Season 2 happen? We'll see. But let's jump straight in, James. Obviously, we've both rewatched this for the first time in what would be a year. Almost a fresh pair of eyes on it, I would guess, at some stage, because it's certainly for me, when I was rewatching it was things I'd forgotten about, things that I didn't notice first time. But what were your general thoughts on rewatching it? What did you think of it?
Yeah, like you say, I've not watched it for quite some time, actually. Since probably we watched it originally. I've watched it a few times since that. Tried to start watching it with my wife, but that kind of just stopped as other things got in the way again, general life. And then I started watching it in bed, using some of the links that we've got available to ourselves to be able to watch it on the go like that. And watching it again this time, like you say, there's been a bit of a time gap between the previous watch. I really enjoyed it again. I think it needed that little bit of a gap between then and now to sort of appreciate it again, to, like you say, get some fresh eyes on it. And it does a really good job. Obviously it's got its pluses that we're going to get into and some of its minuses that we're going to get into as well, but obviously it's got way more pluses than minuses. And I was thinking, if I was going to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, I don't know what I said at the time, but thinking about it now, and that we've had time to mull it over and think about it, I probably would give it like an 8 out of 10 for how well it's portrayed the first game, the second game. It just falls short a little bit because of how quickly it rushes through it. That's the major drawback for me in terms of like recommending the anime over the games. I'd still recommend the games over the anime, but to kind of get new people into the game series who perhaps haven't got the time or the patience for the games, this is the perfect way to get them into the Shenmue series and get them up to speed, get them into the storyline. And like I say, I think it does a really good job of that. But what were your thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I'd concur with a lot of that, actually. Some of the story extras were really cool, actually. When you think back to the first episode where you open it up in the Hazuki Dojo and it flips then over to Bailu Village and you start getting that extra context of Bailu Village, and some of the Shenmue 3 characters are in there as well. And those little things that you don't get asked, but we'll see in the games. I think that's a really nice touch to it, and getting to know a little bit more about Shenfire. You don't get to find out too much more than we find out in the games, but that extra context is really cool. And then I think the way they presented Dobuita was excellent. It was much more like real life Dobuita. I've not been there, obviously, but when you see the comparison shots that Switch was putting out, for example, between the real life locations and what they actually showed, it was much closer to that than the games were. I think the games, as realistic as they looked at the time, were a truncated version of it as needed, but I can see why they did it and went for that more real life element, I guess. And then when they moved into Hong Kong, again, it felt more like Hong Kong would have done back then.
Yeah, they did the research and studied the environments, didn't they?
Which is really good. So I was really, really impressed with that. Obviously, you look at the cast in the Japanese dub. A lot of the original cast came back. So Matsukaze came back, obviously, for Rio. Haruka Teruhi came back as Shenfa. She was Shenfa in Shenmue 3 as well, because her original voice actress is obviously retired. So there's some continuity there as well. I should say I watched it in Japanese again. I have sort of dipped in and out of the English dub, and it's no offense to the English dub. I personally prefer the Japanese, but I also prefer the Japanese for the games, so it's not a slur on it. I think some of the story changes are very well done when you think about the opening and the addition of the karate tournament.
Yes,
which has been talked about for years and years.
Prequel sort of content.
Yeah, definitely. And then when you talk about Yagamashi and how he has more to do with the early scenes, you can see his relationship with Iwao, you can see his concern for Rio as well in that. I think, again, that's a nice bit of context to what's going on.
Yeah.
Obviously, they've had to remove some game fluff. Let's not beat around the bush, for example. You're not spending your time walking from place X go to Y, asking questions. They've had to sort of narrow that down for the benefit of 13 episodes. But as you say, I'd recommend the games to anybody over the anime, because I think it gives you a bit more of the atmosphere and the environment that you can get sucked into. But if you want to catch up to the Shenmue story, you want a really good, faithful, respectful retelling of the Shenmue story, then the anime is definitely a starting point.
100%. And like you mentioned in there about the extra context in certain sections, I think maybe perhaps combining both the games and the anime, if you do get into the Shenmue series, you're going to get extra context from, like Matt says, you know, Yamaguchi-san, seeing him at the Hazuki residence speaking to Ryo's father before he dies. You know, in the game, the first thing you see is Ryo's father dying. So to get this little extra bit of context, and then later, obviously, you get the scene in the game where you're having a little practice the double blow move. And you know, it gives a bit more weight to that scene than when he's talking about his father and it was a sad day, obviously because he was friends with him, and you don't really think of that in the game as such, but you know, because they put a little bit more emphasis on it in the anime. Same with other characters as well. You see them in different sort of behind the scenes sort of scenes, like we get into when we get into the Hong Kong side of things with Joy and Wong, and even Shuing and Fang Mei. They go on for little walks themselves, and you know, stumble into events themselves, don't they, that you obviously wouldn't see in the game because you're seeing everything through the eyes of Ryo in the game. But in the anime, you do see these different sides to the characters, which is nice. And like I say, obviously, if you put them both together, you get the full package.
You do, and I think they've been very respectful to the source material while allowing themselves to go off on a different path with it and give it its own identity. And I think that's crucial, actually, with the anime, to differentiate it from the games, to attract new people in who may not have been interested in the games. You think of the presentation, you think of the music, you think of the extra character content that we're getting. All of that together is a faithful retelling of Shenmue, but done with a different identity, a different spin. And while I can understand some people's, and we'll come on to it in a little bit, concern around some of the speed, some of the pacing of especially the later episodes, I think episode 10 and 13 we may talk about in a bit more detail. I really do think they've treated the series with respect and really gone to town where they could, and considering I think it's probably considered a low budget anime in inverted commas, they did a hell of a job of what they had. Yeah,
like you say, I don't know what the budget was for this particular anime. I mean, me watching it, I don't really watch too much anime, but I thought it looked fantastic throughout. There's a few little areas where I'd probably point a finger at and say you can see where the budget was lacking in those scenes, or you know, some of the background characters. I think I mentioned in the notes here, Matt, where you know they look like they haven't got a face, or they're just underdrawn in the background for some reason. So there's a few little things like that obviously, if I could get them to go back to the drawing board and like give it an extra little coat of paint, then I'd probably suggest those sort of things. But obviously, if the money ran out, then you can kind of see like some things that we're going to get into when we discuss some of the story aspects, like a lot of reusing of little scenes and just general sort of how do I phrase it? You know, like when the characters are thinking, what's that word called?
When they're having sort of flashbacks.
Flashbacks,
and they keep flashing up like the same little bits of those flashbacks.
And stuff that's only just happened the previous episode, or a couple of episodes before. So it feels a little bit more like padding. When I was watching it this time around, like the first time, I just took it for what it was.
Yeah.
But then when you actually see it and you start thinking like towards the end of the series, where some of the budget's sort of lacking, the quality overall is fantastic all the way through. But like I say, in these last sort of episodes, you do sort of see a few subtle things creeping in that I could only put down to like either lack of time or budget or something.
Yeah, and it's a necessity, I guess, a necessary evil, if you like, in some respects. I mean, you look at the Landy rooftop fight, which, I mean, we'll talk about story context in a minute, but the motion that he uses to bat Rio off at the end is the same motion that's used in the dojo, for example. Mm-hmm. I think episode 12 opens up with the ending of episode 11, like literally word for word and scene for scene. And I can get why they're doing it and all the rest of it, but it's those little things I think would take it from an 8 to a 9.
And I do get having those scenes, because obviously if you're watching it the way we watched it originally, like a week has gone by before the next episode, it's sort of like, what happened last week in a sense, like getting you back up to speed to remind you of where we're at. But when you're watching them, like I've just done all together, it feels like they've wasted maybe 10 to 20 seconds of content that they could have used in other places where I feel like it's lacking, especially the Guilin stuff, which was a major upset for me. But I won't dwell on that too much, because I don't want it to come across like we're being overly negative in these sort of things. We're just pointing these things out that we noticed. But things that I did like, you've got a lot of details. We actually got a little section on Easter eggs, but the attention to detail that they did for including some of these things, recreating environments from the games that we know so well. Like obviously you mentioned the Golden Quarter shopping mall.
Yeah.
Obviously Mamo Temple from the inside looks great. There's loads of different locations like that you can tell that they've taken the source material and respected it and tried to recreate it as best as they can in an animation form. You point out things like the posters on the wall of Shuing's room.
It's exactly the same.
Exactly the same. I think, do we see a little scene in Fukasan's room, and perhaps that's got the Virtua Fighter poster or whatever.
Yeah, the move posters on his wall are the same, and it's that attention to detail that I think, for me at least, allows it that those little issues around the end, around the budget, possibly that makes up for it as a fan, because as a Shenmue fan, that's really clever and really well done, because only we would pick up on that sort of thing and go, that's the same poster, that's a toy cap, those sorts of things that make it for us that a casual fan may not just pick up. Oh, that's a nice poster. It's the same poster from the game. It's the same.
There was a lot of those moments, and there was some, mate, where I didn't even realise like the thugs in the Shenmue 2 side of things until Joe Kitchen pointed them out in his videos and stuff. I never even realised that they were using the characters from those thugs, which again is amazing attention to detail, because Shenmue 2 sort of thugs that you see throughout the game, you keep refighting them, and you don't really think too much of them as much as like in the Shenmue 1's thugs, because they've kind of all got names, haven't they, in the first game, whereas in the second you don't really learn anything about them. But for them to go into that much effort and detail to like not just draw random thugs, they've like specifically chosen those same characters, I think was a really nice touch, actually.
Yeah, and actually, I'll pull it up on the screen for people so you can see it. And Joe Kitchen put this together for us when we were doing the streams last year. You can see all the thugs lined up in the Golden Shopping Mall.
Yeah,
and then he's recreated it in Blender using the character, and they are all the exact same, and the designs are the exact same. Now, they don't have to do that, because, with all due respect, they're thugs. They're not main player characters. They're there to get their asses kicked. But again, to treat the source material with that respect just shows, I think, what went into this. We know Jason DeMarco is a big Shenmue fan anyway. He's openly admitted that, and he pushed for Shenmue to get through to be made. And I think the whole team, that's then reflected into the team. Obviously, Yu Suzuki's had his input as well as things have gone on. Change this, maybe do this, and he's had his input. But it seems like they've got the source material and really understood what makes Shenmue.
I know it's silly to say that. It's silly to say, like, you're surprised that they've done this sort of thing. You know, it is Shenmue after all. But for how deep the games are, there's stuff in there like a few layers deep, like Eileen and Izumi. And, you know, they've thrown them in as somewhat Easter eggs, haven't they? Like, just to add a bit to the... Because they know when fans see that, they're going to be like, oh, no. You know, I saw someone comment the other day, it was only after watching the anime that he realised Eileen was a thing in the game, because he'd seen Eileen in the anime and was like, that never happens in the game. Who's this random woman? Do you know what I mean? But because that's how deep they've gone in using the source material to create some of these things. Like, they just thrown them in as a nice touch, and I wouldn't have expected them to have done that. Like, I don't know the team behind the anime, how well they're familiar with the games, but like the stuff that perhaps, you know, only big Shenmue fans like us would notice, and they've done it. So it's really cool.
It is really cool, and it's a tip of the hat to the source material and to those little Easter eggs that, I mean, we'll talk about some more in a minute. But again, it's the respect for the source materials, the respect for the fans and the community, while I think having almost an unenviable task of pleasing us and trying to get new people in. And it has got new people in. I don't know what the numbers are on it or anything like it, but I mean, viewing figures on Adult Swim were obviously very good, about 240,000 average per episode across the 13 episode run. It's alleged, I haven't got the figures, it got 1 million views a week on Crunchyroll. Now, I don't know where that sits in terms of their statistics with other anime, but for Shenmue the anime, that's an excellent performance. I think it shows that quality of anime, even with some of the issues that we've just highlighted and talked about. And some other things I do want to mention are obviously around the story element that maybe could have had a bit more oomph to it. The Master Bayou fight,
definitely,
he kicks him in the face, and that's it, really. And when you consider that's built up in the game, it's quite a tough fight, and B, the ending bit where he's obviously using his special move, Ryo's dodging, and then you smash him.
Such an epic moment in the game, isn't it? So it's felt like they were lacking a little bit. And there's also like a scene. It's very random how it happens. Actually, it's when Ryo goes to fight Greg Moore, and it's like Greg Moore's previous opponent was Bayou, and he just walks away. It's like so random. You know what I mean? Was that episode 10 or something? It's like the very first time you see Bayou in the anime.
Yeah.
And he's just literally just looks at Ryo and walks away, and it was like, okay, that was a bit strange.
It's for me, I thought they were building to like a proper fight, because it seemed that way, because it was they locked eyes, as in like
who's this guy? Yeah. And then you see him again later, and it didn't
really go anywhere. That, for whatever reason, I was, you know, personally a little bit disappointed with it. I'm looking at the notes as well, and we're talking about, for example, that Ryo touches his plaster quite a lot. Obviously, he is focused on revenge, but it is quite a lot.
Yeah, there's one line I picked up on from Ren towards the end of the show when he doesn't touch his plaster. I think it's after he's beat Landy or whatever, maybe just before they go to Guilin, and he mentions Landy about his father, and he doesn't touch his plaster, and Ren says, that's the first time you haven't touched your plaster. So it's kind of like they did the touching of the plaster so much just for this one line to try and say that, you know, Ryo's grown as a person now. He's you know, he's not as, I mean, I don't even know what kind of emotion is that portraying. Is that like he's angry, revenge, or is it sadness, or is it
probably
like
all of it, isn't it? Yeah. It's probably a combination of all of those emotions. But
so when he stops doing it, what's they trying to suggest, you think?
I think they, like you say, trying to signify his development as a character and as a person, that he is starting to calm down. I think how they then, and this is going into season 2, how that would then carry on, because we know that Ryo's kung fu in Shenmue 3 is still lacking.
Yeah,
we know that. So how are they going to balance him calming down with his kung fu still being well behind a Landy or G when he first comes across him? He can't touch him.
in the games they had to do that in a sense as well, didn't they? They had to try and make out like fights were difficult, because otherwise you just wipe the floor with everyone, and there'd be no difficulty level in the game. So it's hard to sort of micromanage that aspect of a character that's progressing, because you can't, you're going to come across thugs, and you can't just make every fight easy. So I think that was a bit of not an issue with Shenmue 3 as such, but something they had to sort of think about, like, how do we show that Ryo's getting better at martial arts, improving, getting stronger, but then still making it challenging for players when they come across, random thugs. So they've got a bit of a balance issue there to address, I suppose, haven't they?
They have, and actually, I mean, whether this be something they did in Shenmue 3 content for a season 2, obviously you're fighting random thugs to a point in Shenmue 3, whether they maybe toughened them up to be more interlinked with the Chi men or something, or be better trained to then close that story gap a little bit, with obviously a village full of martial artists in Shenmue 3 and nobody's trying to take these thugs down. But actually, if they're highly trained martial artists themselves, maybe that would then put an element of doubt. I'm going well into Shenmue 3 content, that just spitballing idea there, but it is something that they could pick up with that. But speaking of story and changes, do you have any particular favourite story changes that are there?
Yeah, I like we've suggested earlier, like the extra sort of side content for the characters, especially someone like Joy, who kind of just is a means to an end in the game, where it's like, oh, you bump into Joy, she helps you to find a hotel. You bump into Joy later, she points you in the right direction to go somewhere else, kind of thing. And she ends up being someone that Ryo kind of has to save at the end of Shenmue 2. Whereas in the anime, they give her a whole extra layer where she's sort of involved with Yuan and Donu in terms of, like, her family were killed by them. They blew up her father's car. And then it kind of like inclinates that her father was involved as well by doing a sort of a dodgy deal. So in a sense, her father in this dodgy deal with Donu and Yuan kind of got her parents killed, and she was an orphan, and she visits the grave and she's very sad about it, and you can see visibly that she's sad, and it's like Ryo coming into her life kind of makes her realize, or kind of like helping to get over that sort of aspect and grow stronger. And especially when Ryo actually eventually beats Yuan and Donu, you see her at the grave again, and she's a lot more, she sort of got over that aspect of her life, and she's no longer holding on to that sort of sadness. And just extra scenes like that. You get an extra scene that's in a location that isn't even in the games, where it's like this greenery looking area, on the outskirts of Kowloon, and she's having a conversation with Ren. And those are the sort of things that I was hoping they'd implement more, for a Shenmue fan to give us extra content and delve deeper into the characters. I mean, if I had it my way, Shenmue 1 would have been a 24-episode season, and they could have gone really in depth with the characters. We could have maybe had a couple of episodes of prequel stuff, introducing Nozomi and getting more out of her. One of the things I did like the Nozomi in the anime, but then at the same time there was certain aspects that I felt like missed the mark. Like, she doesn't tell Ryo that she's going to Canada, so we're sort of left forgetting Nozomi as such. Whereas in our games, when we finish Shenmue 1, when we finish Shenmue 2, you get the phone call with Nozomi in Shenmue 3. Like, the first name you see on that call book potentially is Nozomi in it. You think, oh, let's ring Nozomi up and see how she's getting on. But in the anime, you kind of forgotten her at the end of episode 5. Like, even though she was quite sad and whatnot as Ryo was leaving, and she knew herself she was leaving, not making that clear to Ryo or whatever, Ryo's like, she didn't really mean too much to him in that sort of aspect.
Whereas I think in the games, even though he's very clumsy with how he deals with her, he clearly she clearly means something to it. And it's, you lose a little bit of that. I think also some of that, as you say, is probably down to pacing a bit as well, because they've had to cram all 2 games
in 5 episodes, didn't they?
And they 5 episodes of Shenmue 1, as you say, which isn't a lot to do with Shenmue 1. I know from a story content point of view, it's probably less than Shenmue 2, obviously.
Yeah.
but it's still quite a lot to cram in. But when you think of Shenmue 1 and some of the extra content, you look at Mark and some of the scenes with Mark in the when Rio's working there, he doesn't like him very much, and that because he hears him talking about partying with Goro, even though Rio's not interested in partying whatsoever. You get that extra scene where they tour the harbour and the chalk on the floor for the warehouse, which is used later on. Obviously, then Goro and Mark help Rio during the 70-man battle, which is a nice change. And then obviously Rio and Guizhang fight off the Mad Angels, although they use Swallow Dive a bit too much.
Yeah.
Everything's bloody Swallow Dive, isn't it?
He even uses it towards the end. I did notice, I think it was Donil. He that big extra, that massive thing he does. He what does he do? He does the predictive explosion first.
Yeah.
And then he leaps into the air dead, crazy, kicks him with a Swallow Dive on the way down, and then finishes him off with a counter elbow assault. So it's like these... It's cool in a way, like he's learnt these moves and he's using them in the wild. But like you say, Swallow Dive was like the running joke of the movie, and he keeps announcing it, doesn't he? Swallow Dive!
Oh, yeah, every time. And like when he's fighting Ewing, he announces it, and then she just brushes him off. And actually, speaking of Ewing as well, her scenes are really good.
Yeah.
In terms of a bit more characterization for her. She's as badass as she is in the games, if not more so, but there's a bit more around her and her relationship with Fang Mei and going around saving the boy from the thugs. And it's integrated, actually. The first section of Hong Kong is really well integrated into the Wood, because we were unsure how they were going to do that, weren't we? Because obviously the Wood's a very separate section in the games, but they've integrated the Wood, the Wolin Shu, all of it together really, really well. Like it fit really naturally. Yes, the beats are slightly out of sync in that you do the tree first rather than going to Guang martial arts school, but that doesn't matter really.
No, it flows really nicely. Like you say, he does all the aspects of his quest, but coming back for the Wood at the same time. It's really well integrated. That's one of the aspects I quite liked that they did there. And it kind of felt like they slowed it down a little bit in those sections. Like you got the first 5 episodes that feel a bit whirlwindy, and then 6, 7, 8, when he's picking all the different Wood, they sort of dial it back a bit, and that's the kind of pacing that I would have appreciated throughout the whole show, actually. But yeah, I agree on that.
Yeah, I think that sort of pacing around those elements of Wan Chai were really good, and I think had they had more money and time, and say 16 episodes as an example, they could have maybe carried that through. Like, even for example, the Guilin section, they could have given that a bit more. Obviously,
Jason DeMarco said he wanted an extra episode.
He wanted an extra episode, but they just didn't have the budget to do it, unfortunately. But it'd have been nice to see that Rio getting off the boat, and the introduction is really well done. It's like the game
starts off like it's going to be,
But then
all of a sudden, bang,
bang, and you're in Shenfar's house, you're in the cave, and it's job done.
And it left me feeling a bit like, well, considering that's one of my favourite parts of the whole series, it kind of left me feeling a bit empty. How he just suddenly rescues it's the goat. It's not even a deer. He rescues the goat, and then wakes up in Shenfar's house, and it's like, that was gut-wrenching at the time, because it was like they've cut out this whole epic journey that sort of like it embodies the character of Rio at that point. And you learn so much about Shenfar. That is him growing in that relationship and just going on that journey. It just felt epic to me at the time. And then just to throw all that away to cram it in. And I also noticed, obviously, when they get to the cave at the end, they've got the credits on the screen, and that was a little bit disappointing. Then it's like this stuff's happening. This is like really important, amazing stuff that leads into the future of the series, and it's full of like credits over the screen, which is a shame.
Yeah, and actually, I found it interesting. They used the cave scene at the start of it. Actually, straight away. I mean, that punched me in the feels at the time.
I think it's good. Actually, it's a nice little context for anyone that isn't aware. They're like, I've never seen this side of Shenmue before. What's going on here? If people have just got this mentality that it's sort of a Yakuza-esque looking Dobuita and forklifting sailors, those sort of things. And then the first thing they're presented with is this cave and these mirrors and this mystical element. And it's like, this wasn't what I was expecting. and then that could hook them into finding out eventually.
Yeah, it could, and
I think it works well.
I do. I also think it's a little, whether it's deliberate from an iconic standpoint. Obviously, the cave, we were stuck in that cave for 15 bloody years, weren't we? So I do wonder whether that was almost a deliberate nod as well. I mean, it's ironic now that with season 2 currently not being made, new people to the series are stuck in the cave again. But you know, we'll take that as it goes. I think, and I've touched on this, the Bailu Village stuff is really cool. I like it.
I loved seeing Shenfar's father actually going to the stone pit, because that sort, again, that hits you in the feels, because it's like, oh my god, this is like the mystery that you get at the end of Shenmue 2, and you're seeing the behind the scenes of it. You know, this is the way it starts. He's gone to the stone pit and he's never returned. It's amazing to see that.
I do wonder if they get a season 2, whether he'd be getting captured on the way or on the way out or something like that to then give that motivation for then Ryo and Shenfar to go and pursue that.
That's what they did so well, I think, because they showed a lot of like background and behind the scenes with Lan Di. He interrogates someone in a Chinese restaurant, which gives context to where Lan Di goes. You see at the rooftop fight when Lan Di's leaving, he leaves because Yuanda Zhu sort of said, you know, the mirror or whatever is in Bailu Village. So Lan Di's travelling to Bailu Village. It gives that extra context of why, when you reach the cave and Shenfar's father's not there, he's been kidnapped or whatever, what the motivation is. You're seeing that firsthand in the anime, and it's really cool that they've added those extra little touches that shows the links between why stuff's happening in the game.
It's probably one of the best things they did in the anime, actually, was those extra story hooks. It just, like you say, it's extra context, it's extra lore for us as well, because we can probably consider it canon, I guess, as well. And it knits the story together really, really nicely. Despite me personally, I mean, the rooftop fight, while it was well executed, and there's a school of thought out there that you were due to fight Lan Di on the roof in the games originally, but for whatever reason it didn't happen and they moved it on. For such an iconic moment in Shenmue, and when you get up to the roof, you see Lan Di hanging off the helicopter. The fact you didn't get to fight him meant that moment was so much more. I get why they did it for TV. I get it, because I think they need to give the viewers a payoff in some description,
especially the last episode.
Yeah. But for me, I just thought it didn't need it. But that's just a personal view on it, I guess, more than anything else. And
you could kind of say, like, while it's nice seeing Lan Di in these behind the scenes moments, and they're trying to like really emphasize that he is the main villain, there was some beauty to like only seeing him in the opening cutscene, and then Ryo doesn't set his eyes on until that helicopter moment. It's like, that is a very intense, epic moment, because that is the only next time that Ryo's seen. And he kind of, I suppose it still is the same time that Ryo's only seen Lan Di in the anime. It's just that we've seen him in these other little story beats that they present.
It makes it, I think for a new viewer, I can absolutely see it. And for TV, I can see why they've done it. Obviously for us, because we know, we know the story, and we know how epic that moment is. It can. I do remember seeing on the forums, actually, some people were a little bit unsure about some of the extra content they were putting in, but personally, I think 95% of it worked, and it worked really well. It linked the story really well. Some of it, the odd little bit, I wasn't too sure on, like the way they changed the Bayou fight, the Guilin speed, which obviously we know why that happened. But generally, it was really good. And actually, one of the favourite things of the story changes they did was when you think about the goodbye scenes. So you got the goodbye scene at the end of the whole lot, when obviously Ryo's defeated Dol Neo, Ryo's off, he goes to Manmo Temple, he sees Ewing, you see him walking off, you see Guixang and Jianmin in the tea shop, you see Wong selling his bananas, and you see Daylin there as well, which is a nice Easter egg. And you see Ren at the end of it, and then it cuts to Guilin. I think that was very well done. It's a change from obviously what we're used to, but a nice change all the same.
Going back to your point about canon then, Matt, a couple of like things that they did change in this storyline. So obviously, originally, we were under the impression that Ryo got his scar, his plaster, from a karate tournament. And when you've seen that karate tournament at the very first episode of the anime, you're thinking that that's going to lead to this, but it isn't. It's actually Lan Di that gives Ryo that scar on his face, the plaster, and then I guess that kind of gives the context for him keep touching it and everything else that we've mentioned there. But when you're thinking about canon, is that something that you now think is canon? That's where Ryo got his scar from? Because it doesn't happen in the game, does it? So that's the problem.
No, I mean, personally, I think you can almost have sort of two timelines with it. So the game timeline canon stuff, where we know he gets his scar from the karate tournament, even though we don't actually see it happen. And then the anime timeline stuff, where some of that's they've moved that along, and I see why they did it, because it's impactful that he's fought Lan Di and nearly got himself killed, basically, and then that scar's the reminder of his get his ass kicked and his father dying. So I can take them both quite honestly. I don't know what the wider community think about it, but it's not a massive deal for me, in that they can coexist quite easily. And like I say, it's just a different interpretation of the source material, and that's fine.
I think it works well, actually, that Lan Di is the one that gives Ryo his scar. I was going to say, there's a couple more, obviously, the Chens, Master Chen and Guizhang Chen. They've got a bit of a conflict that does iron out towards the end, which kind of shows that father-son-esque kind of admiration, that when Ryo's off on his journey because of his father, that's the kind of realization that you kind of get in the game. But originally it's like, you can't even call me father, son, it's like I'm Master Chen to you. It's like very harsh. So that's sort of like a story change as such, that they've got a bit of a conflict there. And obviously you don't really see that they're a kind of a legal smuggling unit in the games. You think they're just like the sort of friendly old man and his son that's a bit like not very sure at the start. He's like, is Ryo an enemy or is he a good guy? And then he kind of realises he is a good guy towards the end, whereas Master Chen always came across as like a nice friendly bloke, and then in the anime he's like a drug smuggling mule or something.
They play up the underworld theme a lot more. I know it feels more threatening than the games make it out to be. The games don't explicitly say it, do they? But actually the anime says, no, the Chens, and I can't remember the company they're called, actually, that they run. It's mentioned in one of the episodes, and someone says, "Oh, it's in the antique shop when he gets the sword handguard." It's mentioned there about the Chens.
Not Summit Chen though, is it? Is it Chen?
No, it's not. But I can't remember the name of the company now. It will come to me. I'll put a screenshot of it up so people can see it and know I'm not going insane. But they really play that up, the underworld. And then the Yellowheads are a massive threat in Hong Kong, and like the Chiyu men are the baddest of the bad, aren't they?
Yeah,
they are the top layer bad guys that will kill you, and that's not portrayed as much through the games for whatever reason. So I quite like that change, and that it carries a threat, it carries a weight, and that actually there's more at stake. Because you look at the games, Ryo has got away with everything generally. He has in the anime to a point, but it feels like at any point it could all go wrong.
Another interesting point, a little comment I made, Matt. Ryo is sort of semi-fluent in Chinese, so yes. I did like that they actually used Chinese in parts. So early on in the story, when he's looking for his Hong Kong ticket in the shop, there's a lady that mistakes him for a Chinese guy because he's looking at China tickets or Hong Kong tickets or something. So she comes out with this fluent Chinese and he understands her. And there is moments like that where there is some sort of a Chinese. And especially when he first lands in Hong Kong, I think they were trying to suggest that he knew. I think he actually says something to Master Chen and Guizhang in Chinese.
He does when he leaves, yeah.
And then when he gets to Hong Kong, it's Japanese again. Like all of the Chinese characters are talking Japanese, so it's kind of like they were giving you that inkling that he can get away with it because he knows somewhat Chinese. And I think he's got like a little bit of a travel book at the start, like it's like reading some sort of. But it's nice that they've tried to incorporate that. Obviously, they can't do the whole of Shenmue 2 in Chinese language, and then because then they'd have to do all of Shenmue 3 and 4.
Oh, it'd be a mess, wouldn't it?
So it's good that they just tied the knot there a little bit to give that. But it took me by surprise at first, actually, when we were hearing Chinese and having the subtitles. But I do like that they included that, actually. They kind of like respected and treated the languages and the source material again there, that, you know, these are Chinese characters, so that obviously they are going to speak Chinese.
Yeah, and it just sets that environment and scene a little bit, and also I think the running joke of how can everybody understand Rio and Rio understand them from the games is killed off a little bit.
Yu Suzuki gave an answer to that. He's like, I think, was it in that quick fire questions? He's like, how does Rio speak Chinese or whatever? But it's, how does everyone in China speak Japanese? And Yu Suzuki said, because it's a game.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you look at hundreds of games, Assassin's Creed, you're all over the world.
Yeah.
And
always speak English, don't they?
They always speak English, so it's just what it is, I guess, isn't it? So it's, yeah, it ties the knot up quite well. And actually, when we sort of think about tying the knot and diving into like the other source material and the Easter eggs that are there, and there's quite a few, and we're probably not going to mention all of them because there is quite a lot of these. But you think of the toy capsules, Tails on Rio's desk, the tapes are the same names as in the games. Even the money, that when he pulls his money out when he's looking to go to Hong Kong, it's the same value as it is in the games. Now, they don't have to do that, but I remember seeing that and going, that looks familiar. And then you get the scene in the game and you're like, bloody hell, it's the same. There's loads of these Easter eggs. The Jet Cola machines are knocking around. You see Sega Color on the back of the photos that they have as well, which is really cool. Come Over Guest Houses, there you have the airplane in Hong Kong. There's all this material that, again, they didn't need to do, but did really, really, really well. I don't know if I've missed any there, but
the only other one that I mentioned was the actual photograph of Rio's friends in Nozomi's. You know, that she's looking at that exact same photograph that you see from the game, which is really cool to see. Like you say, these loads. In fact, Magnus did a really good video series that I guess we could link as well, which he went through each episode and tried to find Easter eggs from each of the episodes there compared to the game. So that's really cool that they actually went to the effort and trouble to add some of those things in there.
And his videos are really in depth as well with that, and there's quite a few in there I'm pretty sure we haven't talked about, but we'd be here for hours talking about these Easter eggs and things like it. I'm gonna try and like move us on a tiny bit with the characters a little bit. We've talked about them a tiny bit in our discussion already. We talked about Mark, Joyce, Ewing, Landy's got a bigger presence. Do you think they've done the characters generally justice in terms of their presentation in the game into the anime? And is there anything you'd have changed with them?
No, I think they've done as best as a job that they could do with the characterization. There's obviously some omissions that I would have preferred a little bit more on, like Tom. We see that opening cutscene with Tom in the anime, but you don't really see him ever again. And he's kind of like one of Rio's best friends in the game, and the guy that you go to a lot for your information, whether that's just the way I play. But obviously there's that moment where he leaves for America and he's more of like an Easter egg character. But generally the characters that they did choose to really focus on, like obviously your Wong, your Joy, your Ren, your Shuing, got a lot more backstory. Mai, I was surprised actually that they did so much with Mai, because obviously in the game she is a good character in the game, but she's there a little bit more of the comedic effect with Goro, you know, when they get married and stuff, whereas she actually has good intentions, a real sort of background. She's not really this terrible person that she was in the games when you first introduced to her.
Yeah,
you know, where she's hanging out with a bad crowd. In the anime series, she's always quite good. She's friends with Nozomi, chatting there in the flower shop. And I really like her portrayal in the anime. Mark, I think maybe they could have done a little bit more with Mark. He seems, when you think back, he's one of the more maybe boring characters that you're introduced to. Perhaps any newcomer probably wouldn't even remember that Mark was a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that kind of character that's not as to the forefront as other ones. Like Goro, quite loud, boisterous, very funny, having to piss off the docks and that sort of stuff, and you could actually see him doing that. That was like, again, that could be considered an Easter egg, because he mentions that he knows the best place to take a leak, and then he is actually having a leak. And that sort of stuff with the chalk on the floor, that was a bit strange, but it kind of did bring everyone together, didn't it? So it wasn't just Rio on his own trying to save Nozomi. It was like, how do we use these quite cool characters in Goro, Mai, Mark, Nozomi, and bring them together to help Rio? And that chalk thing sort of served its purpose for doing that, because they knew where to hang, they knew where to go to. In fact, it's them that rescued Nozomi into it. Rio's off doing something else, so there is minor story changes like that, but generally, like I say, I think they probably did Joy the best with her backstory. Made her feel like she was a main character in a sense, whereas she's not so much in the game. But I did like seeing her history, because that was completely new to me.
Yeah, and like you say, I think it gives them an added importance to Rio's journey, to also their motivations as why they want to help him in the first place. Because in some respects in the game, and this isn't a criticism as such, but why is Joy helping Rio other than it looks like she fancies it?
Yeah.
It's there's more, so there's more driving it than just that the whole association with the Yellowheads and the white, that she's part of her father and mother with the part of the White Tie gang that were obviously blown up and killed. Those sorts of things make it and make the characters. And like I say, we touched on this, Xiuing. I loved her portrayal. She's a little less cold in the games, but I don't know, there's more of a badass thing about her. Like when she faces down those thugs and she just moves her foot and they shit themselves and leg it. That's the sort of thing that I really, really liked and really appreciated. And hopefully in a second season, we'll get more of that for some of the characters in Bailu Village, with like Grandmaster Feng, Grandmaster Sun, some of those characters that we didn't get a lot from in Shenmue 3. We got some, but maybe not as much as we wanted. They could do some of that and really give that context to that part of the journey, should we eventually get there. And fingers crossed that we do.
And that was another thing that I really appreciated. I know we've mentioned these Bailu scenes that they did, but seeing characters like Alder Yen, seeing I'd never remember his name, but the first sort of fat panda guy you see in the green.
Yes.
Seeing him there, you've got that character that's quite cold to Rio, sort of like the guy that fancies Shenhua. Seeing them in the anime was really cool, because it's giving depth to Shenmue 3 in a sense, because you're seeing those characters there. Even characters like Yuanda Zhu. They gave him a bit more of a backstory. They showed more scenes with him as well, getting captured, Wong saving him, etc. Obviously, you first introduced to him, and this is something we kind of overlooked a little bit, Matt, but the 5-Stars Corpse section of the game, section of the anime, that was a real massive miss for me. And watching that, where Zhang gives Rio the keys, and then in 10 seconds, it's like,
boom,
it's
boom,
like,
boom.
Remove a brick, insert a key, move a pot, an urn or something, press a button, go through a hatch, put a key in some sort of a lockbox thing, and then it opens up a wall. It was so... when I was watching it for the second time, I was like, oh, this is so stupid. Like, I wish... I love that 5-Star Corpse room, and we did talk a lot about this in the past, Matt, when we were discussing the animes on the original Aryan, but like seeing Rio's father's gi in that room, the significance of the keys, I think like what they actually means lost in the anime, like the animals on the keys, these mythical beasts. I don't think there's enough attention to that, and obviously time and budget, whatever, but I just felt like that little sequence of events was very strange. It was like, how did they know that brick was there? And you could say like, oh, maybe they were told that was there, but it's just how it works. It just seems a bit silly, in my opinion, compared to the greatness of that room.
It was definitely rushed. We said it at the time, didn't we? It was just bam, 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 bam. And in one episode, they've basically done half of Kowloon, roughly, give or take a little bit. I get it from a budgetary standpoint. They needed to try and move things on as quickly as they did. To flip it, obviously, you did get the wiretapper room and the tapes and that sort of stuff, and
that was great.
Tailing Yuan and bursting into a room. It's exactly the same as the games, but.
And my original point there was like seeing Yuanda Zhu and then getting the more context from that. He's get kidnapped, and so it that side of things I really appreciated.
Yeah, I definitely did. And one thing I'm going to touch on away from sort of all the animation stuff is the soundtrack.
Oh, brilliant. And I'm actually glad in hindsight, because you'd expect them to reuse some of the songs from Shenmue, but in hindsight I'm glad they decided to come up with their own sort of OST for the series, because what they produced was fantastic and it just gives us more music to enjoy.
It does. And I know when I interviewed Jason DeMarco, he talked about wanting the music to have its own identity, but he also said there were certain songs they had to use. I know licensing was an issue for some.
Yeah.
And we've said this a million times, there's a lot of fingers in the Shenmue pie for whatever reason. But they used the Shenmue theme quite a lot, but changed it up, made it feel different. Even like when you come across Chai for the first time in some of the earlier episodes, that's a spin off of his music from the games. It's very similar, but they've given it enough of a change that it has its own identity. And I think the music style is very separated from the games. It is a departure from the games, but it works really, really well. You couldn't imagine that soundtrack being in the games, and probably vice versa. But on its own standalone with the anime, it works really, really well. And some of the mood music's really, really good. Like, for example, when it's all happy, and I can't remember the name of the song now, where Ryo's leaving for the karate tournament, he's at home, it's all bouncy and happy. And then some of the music later on where Ryo's contemplating what he's doing and the mood changes around it. I just think they struck the tone for the music really, really well. You've mentioned Peaceful Days is one of your personal favourites. Yeah. The main theme, Undead Noid by Kashirito, it's in your head all the bloody time, isn't it?
So catchy. I can hear it now actually in my head. Perfect theme tune, perfect opening theme tune. It gets you pumped, gets you hyped up. It's so catchy. It's great. And even in that last episode when they used it like halfway through the episode,
yeah, it's a bit weird.
It was weird, but it was, it's still there, isn't it? It does hype you up a bit. It's good.
Sort of, if anybody wants to listen to this soundtrack, I mean, you can buy it. James is going to grab it off the shelf right now. He's got a sealed copy there. He's done what I've done, got a sealed one and an open one. But you can purchase the soundtrack off of Amazon Japan. They still have it. It's around £25-30 if my memory serves me correctly. You can also get it on Spotify, Apple Music, or any sort of good streaming service as well. I would implore anybody to pick this up because eventually it'll come off sale and it'll be a really rare item and you'll be paying £100 for it.
True. There's 33 tracks, by the way, there, guys, if you weren't aware.
Which is a lot to squeeze. I know some of them are only like a minute long or whatever, aren't they? So I can see how they squeezed it on. But that's a lot of tracks on one disc.
Yeah.
So
fantastic music.
Great.
If you're a fan of the show, you've got to pick up the soundtrack. And then throughout, we're going to go through some of the merchandise that they actually released. It was all released Japan side, and actually a lot of it's quite hard to get.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? I just before you sort of showed it off, I will never understand why they haven't done anything this, in the West, because we've gobbled this stuff up. It seems really silly, doesn't it? But
there's from me dog. Sorry,
that's all right. There's plenty there that they've done that we've imported. You'd think, well, why not bring some of this stuff west or make some exclusive lines for the West? I don't know, but
the worst of it is the being able to watch it. Like, we're going to talk about the availability of the show now, but I'm very hesitant to talk about it just because of what it is. But there is a bootleg DVD out there that I would only recommend if it's cheap, dirt cheap, and you're still going to intend to pick up an official release and support the anime if they do a Blu-ray or a DVD. But currently, that's the only way of getting the English dub, as far as I'm aware.
Because it's been taken down from Adult Swim, so the English dub is currently lost to the sands of time unless you buy a bootleg, which I think is really disappointing for everybody, and actually for the actors. I'm speaking for them here, but I'd be a little bit upset by that because they've put their work in. Quite disrespectful
in a sense that after a year, all of that hard work they put in,
boom, gone.
No one can get a hold of. They've got to do a DVD or Blu-ray at some point. I just don't know why they haven't already.
I don't know whether it's down to rights or anything else, but it's mad. But we'll park that for a second and show some of this merchandise off, because there's actually quite a bit of it.
We'll go through it quite quickly, guys. So some of the stuff that you could pick up easily, and I don't know if it's still as easily obtained, but there was these stamps, a set of stamps from Japan Post, and there was 2 sets that you could get. One that came with this sort of hand towel. What is it? I suppose it's. I think it is called a towel.
Yeah.
But it's the material's more like a apron kind of tea towel. Tea towel is what I'm thinking of, actually. And the other part, the other set came with a set of pins, which are really nice, actually.
Pins are really good.
The box is quality. Obviously, you've got that nice silver foily look. And there's all the pins that you can see there. Brilliant. You've got both Dragon Mirrors, Hazuki Tiger in the middle, Forklift. And the Shenmue with the anime logo. And then you sort of get into the stuff that's like less easy to pick up. You can get the anime version of the Sacred Spot Guide that's available at Dobuita Street, and I don't even think this version's available anymore from what I've seen from people that have been there recently.
Pretty rare now.
I think this is the Shenmue 1 and 2 version that you can pick up still. But this is the anime variant, which is quite nice. It's got some of the character art on the back there. And they kind of did this because they did a bit of a event on Dobuita Street in that sort of vicinity, and this was during COVID, so there was no way that any of us could travel there as such. Maybe a little bit after COVID, actually, but the obviously
was
the
shut, wasn't it?
Lockdown and all that sort of stuff that you couldn't get over to Japan. So that was the leaflet advertising the fact that you could get these postcards, and there's a set of 18 postcards here. I'll quickly go through them. You've got character art there. Guizan, Nozomi, Rio, Landi, there was, Shenhua. And then you've got these sort of scene cards that are quite nice throughout the show. You pick some notable character artwork there, which is really nice to see. So as a collector and as a fan of the show, this is great stuff, this is. It's just a shame it was so difficult to get for anyone outside of Japan. And I guess even for people in Japan, because you had to pay a certain amount of money to even get a chance to get one of these, and these were like random. And then they did a greetings card through the post to winners of... How did you apply for this again?
It was the raffle, wasn't it? So you go on the raffle to get the artwork online, and then if you got all of them up in like a raffle type thing, it then enter you into a competition to get drawn for one of those.
Mm-hmm. And that's really nice. It's got the sort of glittery effect. And the only reason I've got that is because someone loves me enough to actually...
A few came over this way, because we know a couple of people who legitimately won them.
Yeah, I think Sheephead got one, didn't he? So
yeah,
they were... At least that was a good thing, that people over here could win them, but they just kind of showed up on the doorstep. So for you know, Matt, you could have won, but it got lost.
Yeah.
And then we had these pouches that were available at Mikasa Volume 2.
They're really nice.
Store on Dobuita Street again, who kind of collabed with Sega, because, you know, it's Sega branded.
It's really nice as well.
Interesting to see. Yeah, really nice. And the last item was, and this is something, I'm going to put it out there just on the off chance someone watching this can get a hold of them, but there was these online gachas.
Yes.
So there was an app that we actually got, and we did ourselves, Matt, right? Where you collect these cards, and we've got all of the blue versions, but they did some yellow versions on site at Dobuita. And if you collected them all and showed them that you got all, I don't know how many there was, maybe 14, 15 of these yellow cards, they'd give you this poster. And obviously this is all digital stuff, and the website's actually gone now.
I know.
Where these really yellow ones were posted, which is a shame because we never actually saved them, because we didn't realise. It was only in hindsight, I think it was that Ezra video where he was travelling around with Yu Suzuki. He briefly shows a clip of this QR code, which if we'd have thought about at the time scanning, it would have led us to be able to complete the yellow set without actually going to Dobuita. And I think trying that QR code now obviously just brings you a dead website. So if anyone out there actually was in Dobuita and collected those yellow things and had the foresight to right-click them and save as and download them, please let us know, because we'd love that. And that's literally everything. So everything's been released in Japan. It's such a shame we never got anything outside of Japan, considering how successful the anime was to the Western audience, those figures you quoted, Matt, Crunchyroll, Adult Swim, you know, it's literally a collaboration with an American studio there, Adult Swim, and there was no merchandise. It doesn't make any sense, does it?
I mean, Sega held the merch rights, so for whatever reason, they didn't think about the West, which is really, really strange. I will forever be bamboozled by that approach to it, because let's be honest, I don't want to sound harsh here, but we are Shenmue fans. We are there to be milked for money. Yep. You know full well me and you would have bought everything. You know full well there had been a group of people out there who would buy everything. And it makes sense with, hopefully if they do a Blu-ray release or whatever, they do like standard Blu-ray, limited edition Blu-ray with shoes, you know, everything that they can do.
Well, they can do the same DVDs. We'd buy a DVD, we'd buy a Blu-ray,
I'd buy everything.
Collector's version that's got like some concept artwork, because they know there's concept art out there, because that was another thing from the Debuta thing where they had posters and these
sketches,
awesome artworks in each of the shops. Really cool that whoever went for the effort of creating all that sort of stuff for Debuta Street there, amazing job. You know, but that concept art out's there, so if they could do an art book, that would be amazing. And we know that we've seen that they were giving away some scripts.
Yes.
So it would be great to have, you know, not even a full copy, but just some sort of, you know, maybe an art book that's got bits of the script in. You know, easy money, guys.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, we're here. The wallet is ready and waiting. But going back to round the anime off a little bit, overall, very impressed with it. Is that fair to say?
Very impressed with it. Like I say, I'd give it an 8 out of 10 in hindsight. At the time, I was probably a bit higher. I know there was a few moments that disappointed me. You know, the Guilin stuff and all that sort of stuff. Would have brought it up to a 9 easily for me. But yeah, I think it's a very solid show. I'm very gutted that it's been cancelled. In hindsight, I'm pleased that in a sense they did pace it to get through to the end of Shenmue 2, because I think knowing now that potentially there's not going to be any more anime, I'm glad that we have got that there, that, you know, they created this content, because Shenmue 2 was a bit of a, I didn't know how they were going to go about doing that, so that was like the most exciting aspect of the anime to me.
Yeah.
And the way that they did it was really, really well, and being, you know, having that for newcomers to the series to be able to digest and watch the Shenmue 2 stuff is like some of the stuff that I wish people had seen, because you hear about these people when they talk about Shenmue, then they don't really know what they're on about. They just talk about forklifts and sailors and stuff. So having an easy way to digest Shenmue 2 content, that's amazing. So I'm glad in hindsight that they did pace it like that, despite us, you know, obviously always being a bit greedy. We always want more, don't we?
And that's not to come across as negative, is it? I mean, we understand why they've done things the way they've done them, and it's fair to point those out. But overall, like you, it was an excellent anime. I'd easily score it an 8 out of 10. The vast majority of it was excellent. The soundtrack's amazing. The attention to detail is second to none. They've paid it such good respect, in my opinion, that it is a shame that we won't get a season 2. But I'll talk about at the end of this how we can potentially change people's minds, shall we say.
Before we get to that, Mark, I've got a question for you then. So going over what we've just covered, the anime as a whole, do you think this anime can have a lasting effect? Or when we think about other aspects of Shenmue's rich history, like Shenmue Online, Shenmue City, things that have fallen by the wayside, people have forgotten about, do you think in, say, 10 years' time, are people still going to be passionate, as vocal about the anime series? Or do you think, could you see it being unfortunately forgotten because it's been cancelled? What do you think the lasting effect of it is?
I don't think it'll get forgotten. I think that's probably too far. When you think of Shenmue Online, Shenmue City, because they never came out,
yeah,
it's been almost not swept under the rug, but it's been left to the sands of time a little bit. Whereas we at least got this first season, and it was a good critical reception and all the rest of it. So I do think there's the appetite there for it, that it won't disappear. I worry that it might end up being that the hardcore fan base remember it more than the casual fan base. And I think there's probably a balance to be struck a little bit in that I think we all want Shenmue 4. That's the main push. That's the main focus, if you like. The second season of the anime, we are pushing for that as well, don't get me wrong. But I think the community would like a fourth game. And that could overshadow as time goes on, the potential of a second season or the desire for it, especially if Shenmue 4 happens and it could end the series and we get that closure, then for some people they're going to go, why do we need a season 2? And there's that argument to it. Flip it and say that Shenmue 4 isn't happening or is unlikely to happen, but actually the anime could be the way to tell it, then I think that appetite could be there. I think it's one of those things that might sit in the background for a few years and then it could well surprise us again. I also think as long as Jason DeMarco is around at Adult Swim, there's a chance. If he moves on and goes somewhere like Netflix or anywhere, I think the chance of Shenmue the anime happening goes with him. Personally, right. I'm speaking for him, of course. I don't know any of the rights or anything of that sort of thing, but I think he was instrumental in getting the thing made in the bloody first place. I think he'd be instrumental if we do get that second season as well. So to answer the question in a nutshell, I think there is a risk of it being forgotten and overshadowed by wanting that fourth game. As time goes on, and if that fourth game doesn't come and looks less and less likely, I do wonder whether that might become the more viable option to get the story finished and then bring it back to the forefront, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Sort of like the lifeline we've got if the game series never happens. There's always there's a chance because they could just, all right, well, let's do an anime series and wrap up the story, on a cheaper budget.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure the anime was cheaper to make than, there's 20 million Yu Suzuki Shenmue 3 game or whatever we'd want out of Shenmue 4, 5, 6. So yeah, I suppose that option's there, but it depends who's still able to take that on. I don't know. There always seems to be, we've mentioned this a lot, but there always seems to be too many people involved with Shenmue.
Yeah.
So it's like, who holds the rights to this? Who holds the rights to that? How easy is it to take that concept and say, 10 years' time, okay, there's not going to be a Shenmue 4, guys, was really sorry. Who's then able to say, well, let's do a season 2 then? It's not that easy, is it?
We might be in a better position than we were. Obviously, this Warner Brothers Discovery merger happened at a really bad time for Shenmue because it got cut along with a lot bigger franchises as well. I think Shenmue
it was greenlit or close to being greenlit, which is a shame to hear that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and they've gone, nope, sorry. But now that that's settled down a little bit and they have said openly they're looking at content again and what they can and can't do, I would hope with Shenmue the anime also finishing 5th in that Crunchyroll poll for favourite anime that was a public vote, that maybe it can be in the conversation again for a season 2 and see, hopefully, where we go. I know there will be a section of the community who, if that happens before Shenmue 4, will be reticent about it. I will be as well, because we're seeing stuff that I would have liked to have played.
Yeah.
But I'm also very intrigued as how they will do Shenmue 3 and then obviously beyond into Shenmue 4 and potentially further.
Obviously, as Shenmue fans who grew up playing the games, we want the games, don't we? So we want that 4, 5, 6, and then the retelling in the anime form to see how they adapt it to anime, which they've done with Shenmue 1 and 2. Whereas if the anime ever took that, it would feel a little bit strange seeing stuff that we haven't played. And, and then this sort of canon aspect.
Yeah.
That is canon at that point. It's a hard thing, isn't it, to consider. If I was to be hopeful for a second season, like you, Matt, I would love to see how they go about doing the Shenmue 3 aspect of things, because we know that's a lot of people dislike Shenmue 3 for those story aspect reasons. And when you've got an anime show, which is telling a story, they can't do mini games or conversations or wandering around picking herbs and stuff. It is literally 20-minute shows of story. So how they go about retelling Shenmue 3 story would be really interesting, because if they do go out of the way to add these extra side character context that we wanted, like Schilling, seeing her background, more interactions with her, maybe she's off, you see the red snakes or whatever that smashed up her temple, that sort of stuff going on behind the scenes. It can add a lot more weight to then her joining up with Ryo at the end, and I think they could do that really well in the anime to give us that extra canon that we wished was in Shenmue 3. They've got a chance there to incorporate into a season 2 of the anime. If that was to be a thing, that would be nice to see for us. It's like you say then, the Shenmue 4 stuff, depending on which comes first, that's the question.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to wrap us up there, because we've gone over an hour, but it's been going back to watch the anime again was with a fresh pair of eyes was thoroughly enjoyed it. And
I enjoyed it, man. I mean, we made a lot of notes here that we haven't even covered, so there's a lot to talk. We could have easily spoken for another hour.
Yeah, easily.
Which, is testament to how well the appeal of the anime was to me and Matt here. I think we've although we're not going to hide the fact that there is some negatives we would have liked to have them made better, for lack of better words there, but I think that the positives for what they did manage to achieve and give us in the end far outweighs all of those negatives that we've had. And I'm just amazed that it's a miracle to me that this occurred, this happened.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel real that we got a way of watching Shenmue 1 and 2 if you don't feel like playing the games, or you've got another means to, digest some Shenmue content that I wouldn't have ever expected to have seen, because everyone else tells you that Shenmue's a failure. So to get this high budget feeling anime just randomly out of nowhere, it was released a year ago today. It's crazy that we can sit here and chat about something that I would never have expected to happen. Everyone always wanted, or when they thought Shenmue was dead, they were like, oh, why don't you just do it in a novel? Why don't you do it in a manga? Why don't you do it in an anime? But now to get an anime alongside a potentially ongoing series, still, it's not dead in the water, and it's just amazing that actually happened. And it's a shame that the cancellation happened as well, but we're always hopeful.
And that's the thing.
You can never, as Shenmue fans, you can never let go of anything.
No, you can't. And actually, I think Shenmue has this history of things that are coming out of left field. The anime certainly did when it got announced back in, I think, September 2020. It was literally out of nowhere. So hopefully that we'll get something.
On that basis, Matt, we're looking at another mobile phone port of something? Or...
Oh, probably, yeah, or some board game or something that they've just made up. But if you're
Shenmue 4 Monopoly.
Oh God, no! Please no. But they should monetize us better. That's just.
And every time you pass go, you get 500 yen off Inu-san.
There you go. Pitch it to Sega.
Yeah. There you go.
Monetize us some more. But if you're wanting to take part in the campaign to not only get Shenmue 4, hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4 on the 4th of every month, we are also tweeting hashtag Shenmue Anime 2 on the 4th of every month as well, to make Warner Brothers Discovery, Sega, Adult Swim aware that we're not going away, that the anime was excellent. I've got loads of stats that obviously I put out there every month for people to see. Join in the fun on Twitter. We do it every month. James and I stream every month for it as well, as part of it, to raise awareness as much as we can, and come out there for any vote, any poll, anything that is Shenmue related. I think the Crunchyroll poll where we came out in force and we punched above our weight and we made some noise. That's the sort of thing that will get us a season 2. That is the sort of thing that will get us the 4th game. But I'm not going to go into that anymore. We've hit an hour and 15 minutes. It's been an absolute cracking discussion, James. It's always a pleasure. Guys, thank you as you always for following us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, watching the streams, digesting our content. It's much, much appreciated by James and I. Don't forget to give us a like, follow, share, subscribe, YouTube, Twitter. You know where we can find us. And take care, guys, and have a good one. All the best.
Cheers, guys.